easily go by the 30.
Oh, contact made into the wall hard. Tears the whole driver's side.
Wrecks. Everybody loves when a race car wrecks, right? Well, actually, no, not really. See, wrecking can happen for a bunch of reasons, and then there's a lot to think about. How do you load the car back in the hauler afterwards? A lot of people don't think about that part. And if they're wrecked, it can be kind of hard to do that. So to start, let me go ahead and say, I get it. I was one of those kids on NASCAR video games. I would drive backwards all the time just to cause the wrecks. Of course, I didn't know any better, and neither do most people who watch racing. And that's okay, but I want to explain it from the side of someone who works in the sport and works on these cars, and how it varies from enjoying it as a fan to having to kind of live through it as an employee at a race shop who works on these things. Again, it can be exciting. It can change the running order. It can bring people you never thought up to the front of the pack. It can bring people that you thought were surefire winners all the way to last place. It also affects pit strategy. Take, for example, Connor Zilisch at COTA. He comes down to pit road, everybody's making green flag stops, and then suddenly, less than a second before he hits pit road, caution comes out. As soon as a caution comes out, pit road's closed, and that means he gets a penalty.
It sounds like they missed it by 9/10 of a second, apparently, to get there.
How much did I, was it there for a while and I just didn't see it? Honestly, you were probably so close to it, you're probably was going underneath it from your view. Yeah, NASCAR sent me a picture. I mean, it's about as high. That's frustrating.
That shakes up a lot. Now, he did go on to win that race, but had it happened a few laps later, who knows? He may have been way out of contention. These are the kind of things that we have to think about when a car wrecks, whether it's ours or not. It can still affect our outcome. Now, today I'm going to talk about when it is our car, because that's what usually will affect us the most. It's almost a guarantee that it will. Whereas if another car wrecks, it might affect us, it might not. I will bring up some of those cases, but it's not really the main point of this video. It's more to focus on what happens when one of our cars wrecks. So to start, you might be thinking, why do these cars wreck so often? Especially if you don't watch very much, that's okay. To kind of put it into perspective, imagine you're driving down a 4-lane road, 2 lanes going one direction, 2 lanes going the opposite. You and another car are in your respective lanes. Now add a third car driving on the line between the 2 lanes. And that's what NASCAR is like. We do have lanes on the racetrack, but they're a lot more of a guideline than anything else, really. It's more as a marker on the racetrack for drivers to help stay consistent. It's just one of the many tools that drivers use. There's nothing like the normal driving laws that say you have to stick to a certain lane in racing. It's completely different. So as a result, these drivers are driving inches away from each other, and it can be very easy to lose focus for just a split second, and that might be all it takes to ruin your race and somebody else's. It could also be just a racing deal. Maybe you're fighting for the lead, just lap after lap, super close to each other. Maybe one lap you go into the corner, you think he's going to give you a little more room than he does, and boom, race is over. Maybe there's fluid down on the racetrack. That could be oil, could be water leaking from a race car on the racetrack, and then other cars driving through it could cause them to spin out quite easily. It could be that another car had already leaked some fluid, and now there's what they call speedy dry on the racetrack. That stuff is kind of like sand, and it's not very easy to get good grip on. That's why they try so hard to clean off the racetrack after they apply it. Fluid could also come right from nature. We have seen multiple times where it starts raining and cars start wrecking. It happens so suddenly sometimes that there's no time for NASCAR to react, throw a caution, and get the field packed back together down on pit road and safe before an accident happens. Another common thing you'll see is a blown tire. Maybe you push it just a little too hard and you really want to try to pit as late as you can. You lose a tire and you're probably going to end up in the wall or another race car pretty easily. Now those are all the things that can cause a wreck, but what are some of the effects of a wreck? Now let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Of course, our absolute first concern is the safety of the driver after an accident. That may seem obvious, but it's not always very obvious to the viewer how hard a hit really is. For example, here's a couple of hits that don't look all that bad necessarily, but I can promise you the driver felt it.
Row is even, right? It's better than if second was broken free, so he can control.
And there goes Justin Allgaier out of line and hard into the wall.
That was a hard hit, man.
Final lap, stage 1. Caution is out for Justin Allgaier, who was running 5th.
Oh no, trouble right there. Something coming off of the car. Chandler
Hopefully
Smith
it's not a brake rotor.
Brakes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Chandler Smith hard into the wall heading into turn number 1. Jeff, it looks like he applied the brakes there and shattered the rotor.
Wow. Oh, I told you that was a hard hit.
Now here's a couple of clips where you might think the driver was really hurt after that one, but actually, you'd be surprised at the energy dissipation that happens here.
By the way, Dexter Stacy has also climbed from his race car.
So this is Blaine Perkins. You see he's going to get hit. The car's going to catch the air, land right here on the roof, and here comes the barrel roll.
Right when you get sideways like that, it starts to bite, and then off it goes. And at this point, you hope when it's up in the air that it doesn't land on the roof.
Look at the parts and pieces just coming off that race car as it barrel rolls down the back straightaway.
It's at 6-7 times I think I saw that car go around.
So it seems like it's hard to tell, but 45 gets into the right rear of the 88, gets the car spinning. That's a scary wreck to see.
All the rolls and the flips, it's all dissipating energy and putting it into a rolling momentum of the car itself rather than packing it right into the driver like it would if they were to nose right into the wall or hit another car head on. It's for this reason that these race cars are built absolutely as safe as possible. NASCAR is always implementing new rules in the name of safety, and they have done a fantastic job of making these things as safe as possible. After an accident, we do have to check the driver's seat belts to see if there are actually burn marks where the adjusters sit on the belts. There will be a shiny stripe going along the belt if that belt has hit hard enough to be burned. It will also get wavy and look a little bit like fried bacon if the belt has been stretched. Any of these indicators means that all seat belts in that seat need to be replaced. Sometimes we will even see an impact hard enough that the steering wheel will bend, all because the driver's holding it at the moment of impact. Now there are all kinds of safety systems built into these race cars, as well as a bunch of little tricks that we use that you may even find on your regular street-going car that make these cars as safe as they are, but I want to save that for another video down the road. For now, you've seen what the driver experiences and what we have to kind of look at on their side of things, but now I want to focus more on the side of the employees back at the race shop and what they have to do after a wreck happens. The first thing that's going to cross really anyone's mind is, can you fix it while you're there at the racetrack? Sometimes it's very obvious, and usually everybody kind of understands what these situations are. For instance, if a car wrecks at Daytona, it's probably not going to be savable. But if a car wrecks at somewhere like Martinsville, the speeds are much lower, and there's a much greater chance that you might be able to get away with a little bit of damage. Regardless, if you have damage from a wreck, NASCAR will put you under what's called the Damaged Vehicle Policy, or DVP. NASCAR will notify a team when their car has been placed under this DVP, and then from that point, you have a 7-minute clock to fix that race car. It does count your time driving down pit road. but you have ultimately 7 minutes to fix that race car on pit road. You can pit multiple times to repair the race car if you need, but remember, every trip down pit road counts under this 7-minute clock. So you really don't have 7 minutes of time working on the car, so you have to pay very close attention to that. NASCAR will keep the teams informed of how much time they have left on this damaged vehicle policy clock. Once you believe you have the race car repaired, you have 3 green flag laps to meet a minimum speed requirement that NASCAR has set, and once you meet that minimum speed, the damaged vehicle policy clock is cleared. You're no longer bound to that 7-minute timer. You can come in and pit for 25 minutes if you really wanted to. Now, if you have major mechanical issues, as long as you can hit that minimum speed and clear the DVP clock, you can take the car behind the wall or into the garage area to work on it. You cannot do this under the damaged vehicle clock. If you are under the DVP clock, you have to be able to repair it on pit road. And NASCAR will not let you make major mechanical repairs on pit road. This is one of those things that crew chiefs and spotters and everyone keep in mind when determining if a car can even be fixed at the racetrack or not. The other thing to think about is going laps down. How many laps will you lose trying to fix this thing? And is it really worth it? A couple of things will go into that calculation that crew chiefs are doing in their head to determine if it's worth trying to repair the car or not. The biggest thing that I get asked about this is why a wrecked race car that's clearly not going to make up any spots would try to go out and keep racing. The reason why they would do that is if they wrecked early enough in the race that someone else might wreck as well, and they didn't lose enough laps to make it worth it. Let me explain. Say you're in a 200 lap race. You wreck on lap 50. There's still plenty of time for other race cars to wreck out, and then they end up placed behind you if their car can't be fixed after their wreck. So you still gain spots, even if it's not on the racetrack directly. The other thing you might see that might bring some confusion is a race car that's been in an accident, comes back out on the racetrack, and then leaves the race a few laps early. Why might they do that? Well, it depends on how many laps down they are. Say you've lost 5 laps trying to repair the race car after a wreck. Once the race hits 4 laps to go, the person in front of you, the worst they can finish is 4 laps down, whereas you're already 5 laps down. So there is no way to gain any more spots. It really doesn't make any sense to stay out after that point, so they'll leave the race early. Now, like I mentioned earlier, these race cars show up at the racetrack and leave the racetrack in a hauler. They're loaded onto a truck, and that applies whether the race car is in one piece or not. There's a lot of different things that can affect how a car loads. Say, for instance, you've completely torn the suspension off the left front and a tire won't go on anymore. You have to figure out a way to get that race car back onto the truck so that you can even bring it home in the first place. Now, for a situation like that, we do have specialized caster wheels that will bolt to the frame rail of the race car, which is usually intact enough to be used for this purpose, and that will allow us to actually push the race car back into the hauler. The other thing to think about is body panels and body supports that are sticking out at who knows what angles. You don't really have a lot of room to get these things back into the haulers. And because of that, if something is torn up, you may have to just cut it off and leave it there at the racetrack. What happens to the driver? Well, the driver will go to the infield care center so long as the race car cannot be driven back to pit road under its own power. This is kind of a guideline that NASCAR has set to say that the wreck was possibly dangerous enough to cause injury to the driver, and they want them checked out. Now, once the race car gets back to the shop, then what happens? It kind of depends on the damage that was caused. If it was damage that only occurred to the body, that can usually be fixed fairly easily. If the car was wrecked fairly significantly, again, it depends on the type of damage that was received. You see, a chassis is split into 3 separate sections. You have a center section, which is where the main roll cage is, where the driver sits, where all the interior stuff is put together. And then you have what's called the front clip, which is everything forward of the firewall. And then you have a rear clip, which is everything behind pretty much the rear window. These two parts, the front and rear clip, are usually the parts that take the most abuse, as you'll usually see a race car run into something head-on or back into something, whether it's another race car or the wall. What happens there is the race car will be brought back to the shop. It'll be torn down to a further extent in the area that needs the repair, just to get everything out of the way for the people in the fab shop to do their job. A race car can only have a certain number of clip repairs done to it before NASCAR deems it unsafe, and at this point NASCAR will not certify the chassis to race again, and it's kind of just junk. The other reason that you absolutely can't repair a race car is if that center section gets bent or twisted in really any way. Any damage to that center section, and NASCAR does not recertify that chassis to race again either. So that car would also be junk. It takes a pretty serious hit in order to do this, because the center sections are built extremely strong in order to help protect the driver under any circumstance, but it does happen occasionally. And what this can also mess up is what's called the car schedule. The car schedule is basically which chassis runs which race. Now, race teams don't have just one race car that goes to the racetrack every single week. What they have instead is several race cars, but the chassis are built differently according to what kind of racetrack that race car will go to. Sometimes they race the same kind of racetrack 2 weeks in a row, and that can really put a damper on things if you only have, say, one road course car but 2 road course races in a row. So Rex can throw a really big wrench into a lot of things for race teams, and it creates quite a bit of extra work. So I get it. Wrecks are fun and they're interesting, and it's not something you get to see every day. But next time you watch a race and you see a car wreck, maybe think about the men and women that now have to fix that race car. But that's just one more thing that makes these stock cars far from stock.